Hello, and welcome to The Giants Next Door, where we speak with the leaders shaping Australia's future through deeper engagement with Asia. Here we talk with some of the country's key business figures about their relationship with Asia and hearing their insights and reflections on what it takes to lead, build and succeed in the region.
Hello listeners, today we're turning the tables. I'm Catherine Mudford and my guest today is Leigh Howard, CEO of Asialink Business. Leigh has built a career at the intersection of public and private sectors, working across Australia and Asia to help businesses expand, adapt and succeed in diverse markets. Leigh brings both strategic vision and in-market experience, from leading top-tier businesses in Malaysia to working as a government official, and most recently here in Melbourne, leading Asialink Business. His work is focused on equipping Australian businesses to understand the nuanced differences of Asian markets. Leigh will soon be leaving Australia and Asialink, and as he prepares to return to Asia in his new role, we wanted to hear from Leigh on the lessons learned from decades of building connections, trust and opportunity across the region. Leigh, welcome to the Giants Next Door.
Catherine, it's great to be with you.
Leigh, you spent more than 2 decades living and working in Asia before you came back to Australia in late 2021 to lead Asialink Business. How did those early years in the region shape the way you view leadership and opportunity?
Well, that's a great question. I do wonder, because at the time I was experiencing the experience. I don't think I was really thinking too strategically about what I was doing. I was, in my mid-20s and immersing in a new culture, and there's so many different elements coming at you. But certainly as time went by, I realised now that there were instances or times when those cultural changes really came at you. The workplace was different, the culture was different. What was quite different was the way decisions are made. How do people arrive at decisions? There's a different process. There's different drivers. Now, there's different drivers across different types of organisations, different industries and sectors and these types of things. But certainly cultures have different drivers. I think I came from a family where something being logical was the ultimate compliment, and you'd think that a decision should be logical. But those are not the only factors that matter. There's a range of factors that matter, such as interpersonal, people, cultural relationships. All of these different elements come together. So what that meant for me was suddenly leadership was much more about adaptability, a touch of humility. When you're young and you're champing at the bit to do things and to prove yourself, and it's all about individual pursuit and these types of things, suddenly that extended network of people around you became so much more important, and bringing people with you. In aggregate, looking back on my time in Asia, I think it's really about where the opportunities lie in that complexity. Suddenly that became the opportunity to see what was possible, how you could bring people with you, how you could blend what you wanted to achieve, in that cultural context. And that became really exciting.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what it was like, if you think about what you described as being sort of that typical way that, a regional New South Wales boy might have grown up and what was valued. What was the hardest for you to shift in terms of becoming successful in an Asia context?
It was in those early days when I didn't quite understand how a decision was arrived at, or it didn't quite make sense to me. And whether it was something small or something, a commercial outcome or other type of driver. I mean, I took them as they came, but there were certainly instances when I was puzzled in those really early years, about how things happen. But look, I've always been a fairly approachable person. I like hearing from people. I really don't care too much for status in terms of my relationships. I'm equally happy listening or speaking to someone, who's, I don't know, the person who's running the business, or the person who might be delivering the goods, or any of those types of things that I had in my early experiences. And I think that got me a long way, really to try and understand what were the different operations and what was actually happening. So here's the here's what's trying to be achieved, or here's the stated ambition versus then how's that rolling out. And it's always rolling out through people, right? So understanding how people were acting, operating, following the rules, interpreting the rules, making their own rules, all of that in aggregate seemed to give me a good picture of how things were happening.
Yeah. So it sounds like that mantra of sort of watching and speaking less than you listen stood you in quite good stead. Of course, you've had the unique experience of 20 years in region and then coming back into Australia. So maybe tell us a little bit about what it's like to re-enter Australia after such a long time away.
Well, reverse culture shock is real. No, that was an amazing experience. My time in Asia, and particularly Southeast Asia, it was so enriching. I mean, I often say to people that it enriched my professional and my personal life beyond measure. So I had all of this, all of these relationships, this understanding, these contacts, this wonderful network of folk, but I did decide it was time to come back. COVID played a bit of a role in that. I wanted my kids to experience time in Australia, so there was a personal driver as well. But I certainly came into Australia with a fresh pair of eyes. I mean, I'd been coming back, I'd been connecting. A lot of my roles and my work connected to Australia, so I was still an Australian business person or, operating in Asia. So that was very much part of what I'd built out in terms of the work that I was undertaking. So I wasn't completely divorced and still had relationships here. But coming in, joining meetings, and again, it's the reverse of what I said earlier. So the way decisions were made, the way meetings ran, meeting dynamics, just so amazing to see the Australian way of running a meeting and the unstated agenda, in terms of the round of introductions, who speaks first, these types of things that were just different. Not better, not worse, but just different. Very lucky to work at Asialink, extremely lucky, because there is a group of people who are very attuned to the dynamics of Asia culture, or have heritage that means that they're attuned to different cultures as well. So I think that was a wonderful stepping stone into reintegrating to life in Australia. So a bit of a soft landing on that regard. But again, the Australian ecosystem is distinct. The role of government, the role of business, the role of industry, the role of universities, all of these things were colliding. So navigating all of those stakeholders and looking for a way forward for Asialink Business was really important.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more about navigating that ecosystem. It is incredibly complex, the one that you've stepped into. And so if you think about, I guess, what you learned, and if you were to perhaps give a little bit of wise counsel to anybody stepping into your shoes shortly, what are some of the things that have been helpful in terms of understanding how the ecosystem works, where the points of entry are, and where you maybe step out of the ecosystem from time to time to achieve things that matter?
I think even before I joined Asialink and took up the role of CEO of Asialink Business, I was aware of the power of collaboration and that the resources I had direct control over, as much as you can, were never going to be sufficient to achieve the scale of outcomes that I wanted to achieve. So getting the lay of the land, marshalling resources, looking for allies, and maybe folk who are yet to be allies. So converting people to the cause became really important. It is a wonderful time for Australia to be thinking about its engagement with the region. It's not the first time we keep doing this. It's a little bit episodal in some sense, but now it's a brilliant time. I mean, the rise of Asian consumer markets and beyond China. I mean, thinking about Southeast Asia, India, Japan, the rest of the region, there's a really good time to be thinking about those markets, those environments, those cultures. They're rich with opportunity. So it's wonderful to be able to present those different profiles to audience, clients, people who are interested, businesses and the like. And also making our friends in Canberra aware, so working with government, working with industry bodies. And there's a really positive message to deliver around the upside of improved engagement. So it's not a hard case to make, but perhaps enlisting people to the cause in their otherwise busy days and making sure they prioritise it. That's been part of the art of the role.
And I would say I've seen and heard that from you constantly over the last 4 years, which is just the real opportunities that there are in the region with changing demographics, the rise of the middle class, all of the growth that we see in the region. What do you think are potentially some of the overlooked opportunities that Australia might miss in the region?
So it's getting past that one-dimensional view of Asia, even the term Asia. Like, one of the most challenging parts about working in Asialink is that Asia's a big continent, and we're learning more and more about countries, markets, cultures. And as they come online, as they become more affluent, so you talk about the rise of the middle class, but the rise of the middle class in particular, specific countries, then there's more worth sharing. We have a resource base which allows us to do that relatively effectively, but we have to prioritise as well. So getting past that one-size-fits-all attitude towards Asia, really looking for the systems within systems, and now those could be geographic, so thinking about not just capital cities but mid-tier cities, which our view of a mid-tier city might differ markedly to the size of a mid-tier city in an Asian country. Think about sectors or even ways to market. So things like e-commerce. I mean, that in itself is just an amazing opportunity to unpack the pathways to market. COVID really accelerated the appreciation of e-commerce for a lot of Australian exporters, but it still continues to grow, and the platforms in Asia are just really dynamic and very large scale and very sophisticated. So again, getting past that, I come back to the systems-based approach, so systems within systems. What do you need to understand to unpack just the surface level view of a particular market?
Yeah. And I really think about the way you talk about sort of the dynamic, fast-changing context of different Asian countries. And for folks like you and I, we spend a lot of time in regions, so we see that often. What are some of the old tapes, the old messages that you hear here in Australia of experiences that might have been true 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but certainly aren't true any longer in terms of either the opportunities in the region or the ways of working with the region that really can have a great impact?
So that's a great question, because the legacy views or the outdated perceptions of a lot of parts of Asia are really holding us back in a lot of ways. Now, it's not again that there's just one Asia or that Asia's at one stage of development. So we've got some really advanced and evolved and sophisticated economies and markets, and bringing people up to speed on those. And I sometimes feel, unfortunately, it's not until people physically travel there that they truly appreciate it. I mean, I remember one time in KL, the Australian Institute of Company Directors held their annual conference there. And that was a wonderful thing to do, just brilliant. So had all of these Australian directors coming to KL and convening there. And it's in the KL Convention Centre, which is a first-rate facility, sitting under the Twin Towers, just wonderful architecture, wonderful infrastructure. And people turning up and going, oh my, this is real, but it had to be tactile for them to appreciate it. And I think that's, short of everyone travelling to these markets individually and experiencing them, I wonder how we really make people appreciate just how advanced and evolved some of these economies are. I mean, I still am fascinated. Every time I go up, there's new high-rises, there's new shopping malls, there's new factories, and when I say factories, I mean, we're talking clean facilities that are producing high-end goods, advanced manufacturing. The trajectory there, the rate of change, it's hard to keep up with. So there's lots of opportunity. You need to segment it. You need to think about, well, where am I going to prioritise? Where am I going to focus? But yeah, certainly trying to keep pace with the change and therefore the opportunities that come with that I think it's really valuable.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? One of the places I've been based in Asia is Vietnam, and my godson's still at school there. So I was just chatting to him the other week about who is in his class. They're on school holidays and what were they all doing. So he has a Filipino mom, a Kiwi dad, and they've lived in Vietnam all his life. But he is talking about his classmates who have gone. Many of them stayed in Vietnam because most of the children in that international school are, from Vietnamese families who are growing big businesses, doing incredibly dynamic things. And the folks in his class who weren't were from Korea and Hong Kong, he told me. So I share that because it's also just the nature of who is in our region, what that looks like from a competitive landscape, and the fact that often in Australia, I notice we're quite focused on the bilateral relationship, but the fact that there is so much more from a complexity and competitive context that we should just be looking at with open eyes, because it also helps us in terms of the way we grow and learn and see all of the things that are unfolding maybe outside of our own backyard. Interesting.
Look, in my time, I'm certainly seeing more of that meshing across Asia, and it unfolds in interesting ways. So, for instance, the movement of talent is a really good one to look at, and all of a sudden having people from one country, and maybe people from. I remember when again in Malaysia, to use an example, the country manager for BlueScope Steel came from Thailand, and then so did his successor. And I don't think that was by design. I just think it just happened to be who was most skilled, or where was the good talent pool to bring people from. And so seeing that overlay, there's been more movement of skills and talent across the region, and I think that's a healthy thing overall. Intra-regional trade, again, COVID really accelerated that because of the impact on supply chains and sea freight. But the trading within Asian markets has really evolved and is something to be acutely aware of. So I can't help but think that Australia wants to keep pace with that. We want to have our chip in the game and make sure we're making the most of it and not being left behind. I mean, that's really where some of this comes down to, is not denying ourselves the opportunity of being part of that mix that you alluded to.
Yeah. And that's been something that's been on your agenda for a long time, Leigh. You are the founding director of AusCham ASEAN, and you helped shape that platform for business engagement across the region. Tell us a little bit about what drove you to take on that role, and the impact that you've seen from an organisation like that.
Yes. Now, I'm one of the founding directors, so there was I certainly can't take credit for all of it. I've had interaction and involvement with Australian business chambers for a long time. So even when I was younger than I am now, the first country that I went and lived in 1998 was the UAE. I lived in Dubai, and as someone who was young and looking for opportunity, I joined what was then referred to as the Australian Business in the Gulf, and as I say, rocked up as a rather youthful professional, and there were organisations like BHP Steel, University of Wollongong, Foster's, just to give you a sense of what was the profile of Australian businesses then. I think the ABIG has since renamed to the UAE Business Council or something similar. And then again, when I went to Singapore, but then very much in Malaysia, I just naturally involved myself, engaged with the chambers. I remember distinctly turning up to my first meeting for the Malaysia-Australia Business Council and meeting people, and they were much more senior than I was at the time, and became a member, became an active member, was asked if I would contribute to the committee, and then enlisted in the council, elected to be a council member, and then ultimately elected as chairman of the Malaysia-Australia Business Council, and then sucker for punishment, I guess I'd say. No, really in terms of looking to continue to make contributions. At that time, we had a formation of all the AusChams in Asia, and it was called Australian Business Asia. And that held together for quite some time. But then there was this natural bifurcation in terms of the North Asian chambers, and AusCham ASEAN made a lot of sense to form as well, to have direct engagement with the ASEAN Secretariat. So AusCham ASEAN is a really effective body. It's an umbrella chamber, so it's a chamber of chambers. So that the only members of AusCham ASEAN are the individual bilateral country chambers. And that gives it a huge role to play in terms of advocacy, direct engagement. Every year it produces an annual survey of Australian business sentiment in Southeast Asia. That's really been spurred on now by the current Australian government's focused on Southeast Asia with the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy. So I've always thought chambers have a really important role to play. I'd love to see more work done around the capacity building for chambers because they're very uneven depending on their resource base. Some get to be very professionalised where they've got large members and resources. Others, it's volunteers 100% giving their own time. And that's challenging to get, when it's coming out of your day job entirely. So those with secretariats tend to have more capacity to make a contribution. So I think there's room to grow there as well. But the role of business chambers as an intermediary, as a resource for Australian businesses heading up, to do some advocacy work. I mean, I remember at the MABC going in when a business had an issue with a container stuck on the docks or some customs challenges or something like that. There really was an important role to play. So I'm always appreciative of the contribution of Australian business chambers and Australian business councils internationally, but particularly in Asian markets. And very proud that I get to continue to contribute in some way.
Yeah, that's great. And we were talking earlier about the way the ecosystem works, and you just sort of highlighted this really important role that the chambers play. What would be missing, I guess, if we didn't have that chamber contribution, or how does that all sort of work from your perspective?
Well, I think it's great to see government playing more of a role, but government has a defined role, and there's things government can do and can't do and shouldn't do as well in terms of the role it plays in terms of bringing commercial opportunities together. So business chambers play this really important bridging role, and they bring together the community of Australian-linked businesses in that market. They then are able to draw out those themes, surface the themes and the issues and the challenges that businesses might be facing. I mean, that's never truer than when there's a free trade agreement on the horizon and there's input needed, and they need to be aware of what are the practical challenges that businesses are facing. So being that voice of business into government, and government on both sides. I mean, it's really quite powerful. It's great that you have an association with the Australian Embassy or High Commission linking back to Canberra, but also with the host government and what they're thinking about. Now, most of the countries in Asia are pro-trade, and they see the importance of foreign direct investment to nation building. So they're very appreciative of it. They want to understand what they could do to facilitate more business engagement and make themselves more relevant. So it's an appreciated role, and I think that bridging aspect and having that community come together is really valuable. And more power to the chambers. I mean, I really like to see them go further and be better resourced and see what more they could do.
Yeah, absolutely important, and particularly when you describe the kind of skills and capabilities that a really impactful chamber has, being able to add to that in terms of resources makes such good sense. Leigh, in your career, of course, you've spanned both corporate leadership roles and senior government positions. Tell us a little bit about the biggest difference that you see in how each side approaches doing business in Asia.
So I've had the good fortune to have worked for a range of different organisations, and what I mean by that is I've worked in the private sector, both large corporates and large Australian corporates. I've started my own businesses and been an entrepreneur and had an entrepreneurial journey, which was very rewarding. I've worked as a government official. I've chaired a non-profit. I'm now working for a university. So that's another type of organisation. And so all of these organisations have different drivers. So a lot of them have been in similar space. The Australian business in Asia theme has been prevalent through the various roles that I've held and the hats that I've worn. But you really need to understand the different drivers, and it's not dissimilar to understanding different cultures and being able to move across and to navigate these. And if you do not understand the different drivers, if you do not appreciate them and appreciate the role they play in decision making, so whether it's high governance, or it's profit driven, the way in which you're looking to achieve outcomes, if you do not appreciate those different drivers, you'll get hugely frustrated. And I've seen that as well. I've seen colleagues come in from different sectors and try and make a go of it, and it doesn't translate. It doesn't always translate well. So if you can pause, reflect on what those drivers are, see how things come together, and understand how decisions are arrived at, how outcomes are formed, you're going to be much more effective and also have a much more enjoyable time of it than if you keep banging your head against things that you question and say, why is it this way or it shouldn't be this way? I mean, the level of frustration that folks sometimes have in changing environments can be quite pronounced. So understanding those, working through those, I mean, I think that's a key ingredient to success.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you can share, but have you seen a time where that alignment's worked quite well, where both sides have understood the drivers and have been able to adapt or bring about a plan or a program or an investment that takes that into account?
Absolutely. So I think about my time as Deputy Commissioner with the Victorian State Government, an environment I'm going back to in shortly, and working with businesses and cohorts of businesses. I mean, I've enjoyed starting businesses. It's very taxing, but I've enjoyed starting businesses and leading businesses and looking for commercial outcomes. That is rewarding. At the same time, I like working with large cohorts of businesses. I like, taking entire communities towards an opportunity and seeing what we can bring out of that. So that unlocks bigger outcomes in some ways. So being able to appreciate what businesses are looking for, what really matters to them, designing a program. I mean, the COVID recovery work, when you see businesses who are impacted by that, and not just businesses, I mean, even students, a big part of what the Victorian government does is around education. And you can appreciate just how impactful that was on international students who were unable to be based here in Melbourne. So working with the stakeholders, understanding what's important to them, really getting to the heart of it and understand what would make for the best outcome for them. And then how can government rally around that and design a program that has some level of equal access and opportunity, but to help advance that and achieve those types of outcomes. When you're recording, outcomes from a trade mission, when you're seeing a program, we developed an e-commerce accelerator program. When you see the outcomes that are delivered through that, and we literally had businesses that went from at one stage having no online presence in an Asian market to 90 days later having a store online ready to go, selling products and goods. I mean, that was brilliant. That was just absolutely enjoyable. And to see the feedback on that from business go, well, that's made a huge practical difference. I would have sort of navigated my way around this in a rather indirect fashion, a rather non-linear fashion to get there. So if you can deliver really effective, impactful outcomes, that's highly rewarding.
Yeah, I can really feel that passion and that excitement that comes with being able to make a difference to businesses in terms of how they can be successful in and with the region, which makes me wonder about your next role. You're about to step into the role of Victoria's Commissioner to Greater China. So looking back at all that you have achieved, in public sector, private sector, here in Australia, back in Asia, what are some of the biggest lessons, I guess, that you might be taking with you as you head into your new role?
Yeah, it's really a great opportunity to synthesize all of those experiences I've had, and some of this new role is very familiar, but some of it's going to be quite different. And being able to think about how you look for systems within systems, that's something I remarked on earlier, and getting the lay of the land essentially and understanding how things operate is very important. The value of trusted relationships, which is the precursor to trusted partnerships, is vitally important. Also being clear about your interests. I mean, what are you actually trying to achieve, and not feeling shy about putting that front and centre. I think that's helpful. I think that's helpful when there's people who they're allied to the cause and they want to be part of where you're heading. But even for those who might not at first be engaged or agree with what you're trying to do, I mean, you have to a certain extent, put that front and centre of what you want to achieve in terms of here's the interest, here's my goals, here's my ambitions. If you don't put that up front relatively early, then it's very hard to get buy-in. And as I say, buy-in might come from allies and advocates, but also sometimes getting detractors to convert to what you're trying to do. So that all takes time. You need to watch, you need to listen, observe, look for where those opportunities present themselves. It's a little bit like this time at Asialink Business as well, that perhaps It might take converting people one at a time and holding their hand through the journey, but I expect it to be very rewarding.
Leigh, you've been hosting a podcast, Giants Next Door. You are moving to the giant. Just perhaps one reflection from what it might be, what you're looking forward to, I guess, most about being inside the giant, one of those giants, as opposed to some of the work you've been doing over the last 4 years.
Absolutely. Well, look, the inspiration from the Giants Next Door, and I didn't name this as a podcast that was very, very functional. Could have just put Asia front and centre in the name of it, but it was really looking to have people think about just the size of the prize. What are the opportunities and just how big they are? I mean, there's so many. I get that there's challenges. I get there's risks. That's been a common theme in terms of some of the other guests I've spoken to, but on the other side of this is huge rewards for individuals, for businesses, and for the nation at large. I don't think that should be understated. I don't think we should be shying away from just how big that unrealised potential is. I mean, Australia does really well in the region, really, really well. But there's so much more to be done. There's so much more opportunity and upside. So I'm, at heart, a practitioner. I like being in markets. For me, heading to China is a new experience. I'm no stranger to China, but at the same time, living in the market, operating the market, understanding the way the system works, the people, the institutions, the organisations, all of that, and bringing that together to try and deliver some, good outcomes for everyone that matters is really important to me. So I'm really proud of the work that Asialink and Asialink Business does around developing Asia capability. I've been immensely proud of the team we have, yourself included, that have delivered really impactful programs, profoundly impactful programs for cohorts of people in business, but government, civil society, a range of sectors. And that's what Asialink does so well, as it reaches across so many parts of the Australian community. I'm also looking forward to continuing to develop my own Asia capability in new and different ways and to make a contribution, once again, living in a part of Asia.
Leigh, we have been incredibly privileged to have you with us at Asialink Business for the last 4 years. You really have built a legacy that I hope you feel proud of. We are looking forward to continuing building on that, to do everything that we can to support that national agenda of really building an Asia-capable Australia. But mostly I'm sort of looking forward to perhaps fast-forwarding 3 or 4 months and the opportunity perhaps to have our second interview with you in your new role, sharing perhaps some of those perspectives from the ground.
I think there is a contribution to be made in terms of a window on the world. I think sharing insights and observations, at least from for me being in China, but for folk who are based elsewhere across the region, I think that's hugely important for Australia to have those contemporary insights and those updates from what's happening in market, rather than the perhaps outdated or legacy perceptions that we touched on earlier. So I would welcome that opportunity, Catherine, and I think that being part of the Asialink family or community for years to come would be something I'd be very happy to do.
Leigh, thanks for joining us for the Giants Next Door podcast, and we wish you all the very best in your new role.
Catherine, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the Giants Next Door. If this conversation sparked something in you, be sure to follow the show and share it with others who are thinking seriously about Australia's future in Asia. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.